Cassian Graves never had a bedtime, just blood debts and bounties. By 20, he'd outshot 5 sheriffs, but the 6th, he ain't interested in guns, he wants the kid's soul. They called him Kid Smoke. Not because he favored a particular brand of cigar, but because he moved like a phantom, appearing and disappearing in a haze of gunfire and dust. Some said he was born under a bad moon, others whispered he was a demon in disguise, sent to test the righteous. Whatever the truth, the name stuck, a brand seared onto the legend of Cassian Graves. He was a whisper in the cantinas, a shadow in the canyons. Mention his name and watch grown men flinch, their hands instinctively moving towards their holsters. He was fast, impossibly so. A blink of an eye, a puff of smoke, and another soul sent spiraling down to hell. They said he was raised by wolves or something close to it. A pack of gamblers, bounty hunters, and outlaws who taught him the only law that mattered: survival. They sharpened his instincts, honed his reflexes, and filled his young mind with the poison of the Wild West. He learned to shoot before he learned to read, to kill before he learned to care. By the time he turned 20, Kid Smoke was a force of nature, untamed, unpredictable, and utterly lethal. He was the dark heart of the West, beating with a rhythm of violence and despair. And 5 men, wearing the star of the law, had already tried to stop him. 5 men who now lay beneath the cold, unforgiving ground. Sheriff Bartlett, they said, was a good man, honest, fair, and quick with a smile. He lasted 3 weeks. One sun-baked afternoon, he tried to arrest Kid Smoke for disturbing the peace, a drunken brawl that left half the saloon in splinters. Bartlett never even cleared his holster. They found him face down in the dust, a single bullet hole between his eyes, his star gleaming mockingly in the sun. Then there was Sheriff Calhoun, a former Army scout known for his tracking skills. He figured he could outsmart the kid, lure him into a trap in the canyons. He was wrong. They found Calhoun's horse wandering aimlessly, his saddle empty. Calhoun himself was discovered days later, hanging from a Joshua tree, a playing card, the ace of spades, pinned to his chest. Sheriff Davies was a tough old bird, a veteran of the Indian Wars. He brought in a posse of hardened gunslingers, determined to bring Kid Smoke down by force. The posse returned, smaller, much smaller. Davies was the last to fall, cut down in a hail of bullets in the middle of town. And then came Sheriffs Elm and Ford, each with their own strategies, their own hopes of ending the reign of terror. Each buried alongside their predecessors, their names etched on simple wooden crosses, a grim testament to the legend of Kid Smoke. 5 stars extinguished, 5 lives snuffed out, all by the hand of a boy barely old enough to shave. The West held its breath, waiting for the storm to break. But how did a boy become a legend of death? It started long before the gunfights, before the fear, before the name Kid Smoke even existed. It began with a stagecoach robbery gone wrong, a desperate mother fleeing through the desert, and a baby left alone under the scorching sun. He was found not by wolves, but by a grizzled old gambler named Deuce Riley. Deuce, a man with a heart as worn as his cards, couldn't bring himself to leave the child to die. He took him back to the ramshackle town of Redemption, a haven for those who lived outside the law. Redemption was a school unlike any other. Bounty hunters taught him to track, outlaws taught him to shoot, and gamblers taught him to read faces and play the odds. He learned to survive by his wits and his speed, always one step ahead of danger. He was a quick study, absorbing the lessons of the West like a sponge. He didn't have toys or bedtime stories. His playthings were bullets and knives, his lullabies the crackle of gunfire and the howls of coyotes. He grew up hard, without affection or guidance, shaped by the harsh realities of his environment. He was feral, yes, but also fiercely independent, loyal only to those who had earned his trust, a rare commodity in Redemption. This was Cassian's upbringing, the forge that shaped Kid Smoke. Meanwhile, miles away from the dusty streets of Redemption and the bloody trail of Kid Smoke, an old man sat on his porch, watching the sun dip below the horizon. Jebediah Stone. He was a legend in his own right, a retired marshal who had seen the West at its worst and somehow managed to survive. He hung up his gun years ago, traded his badge for a rocking chair, and tried to forget the faces of the men he'd killed. But the West had a way of pulling you back in. A telegram had arrived that morning, detailing the latest sheriff to fall victim to Kid Smoke. Jebediah had known each of those men, worked alongside them, shared stories and whiskey around crackling campfires. He knew what had to be done. He felt the familiar weight of duty settle on his shoulders, a burden he thought he'd finally escaped. He looked at his worn hands, the lines etched deep into his skin, each one a reminder of a life lived on the edge. He rose from his chair, his joints creaking in protest. He walked inside to the dusty trunk in the attic. It was time to dust off the old badge. The West was calling, and Jebediah Stone was answering. He knew this wouldn't be easy. Kid Smoke was a different breed, a creature of the shadows, but Jebediah Stone had faced worse. He was ready. Jebediah spent the next few days preparing. He oiled his old Colt Peacemaker, checking the mechanism with practiced ease. He sharpened his Bowie knife, the steel gleaming under the lamplight. He mended his saddle, ensuring it would hold for the long ride ahead. He wasn't a young man anymore, but he still knew how to take care of his gear. More importantly, he visited the families of the fallen sheriffs. He offered them what comfort he could, a silent promise that their loved ones wouldn't be forgotten. He listened to their stories, their grief fueling his resolve. He learned about the fear that gripped the towns, the way people whispered Kid Smoke's name like a curse. He spoke to the old-timers, those who remembered the days before Kid Smoke, before redemption became a haven for outlaws. He pieced together the puzzle of Cassian Graves' life, trying to understand the boy who had become a monster. He knew he couldn't just ride in and try to outgun the kid. He needed a plan, a strategy. He needed to understand his enemy to find his weakness. Jebediah wasn't driven by hate or revenge, but by a deep-seated sense of justice. He was a shield against the darkness, a guardian of the innocent. And he wouldn't rest until Kid Smoke was brought to justice, one way or another. He packed his saddlebags, a Bible and a bullet-proof vest, and was on his way. It was a sweltering afternoon when Jebediah finally rode into redemption. The town was exactly as he expected, a collection of ramshackle buildings clinging to the edge of the desert, a haven for outlaws and desperados. The air hung thick with dust and the stench of stale whiskey. He found Kid Smoke in the saloon, a shadowy figure nursing a drink in a darkened corner. The kid was younger than Jebediah had imagined, but his eyes held a coldness that belied his age. A ripple of unease went through the saloon as Jebediah walked in, the clinking of glasses and the murmur of voices fading into silence. Jebediah approached the kid, his movements slow and deliberate. He stopped a few feet away, his gaze unwavering. "Cassian Graves," he said, his voice raspy but firm. "I'm Marshal Jebediah Stone." Kid Smoke looked up, a flicker of amusement in his eyes. "Heard stories about you, old man," he drawled. "Thought you were retired." "Some jobs ain't meant to be retired from," Jebediah replied, his hand hovering near his Colt. "I'm here to bring you in." The kid laughed, a short, sharp sound that echoed through the saloon. "You and what army?" he sneered. "Just me," Jebediah said, "but that's always been enough." He stood his ground, unafraid, a weathered oak standing against a desert wind. This was the moment, the clash of legends, the showdown had begun. "You think you're different, old man?" Kid Smoke said, his eyes narrowing. He leaned back in his chair, his hand never straying far from his own gun. "You think you can do what 5 sheriffs couldn't?" Jebediah didn't answer. He simply stared back, his gaze unwavering. He'd seen that look in young men's eyes before, the arrogance, the invincibility. It was a mask, hiding fear and insecurity. Kid Smoke shifted uneasily. He was used to seeing fear in the eyes of his opponents. It was his weapon, his shield. But Jebediah Stone showed no fear, only a quiet determination. It was unsettling. The kid decided to press his advantage. He stood up, his movements fluid and predatory. He circled Jebediah slowly, like a wolf sizing up its prey. "Maybe I should show you what happens to those who cross me," he hissed, his voice low and menacing. Jebediah remained still, his hands loose at his sides. He'd faced down killers far more dangerous than Kid Smoke. He knew how to read a man, how to anticipate his moves. He saw the flicker of doubt in the kid's eyes, the uncertainty that belied his bravado. "You remind me of someone," Jebediah said, his voice calm and steady. "A scared little boy trying to prove something." The kid froze. His eyes flashed with anger. Jebediah had struck a nerve. He had seen through the legend to the vulnerable boy beneath. The game had changed. This wasn't just another sheriff. This was something else entirely. This was a man who knew his secrets. And that was more dangerous than any gun. Jebediah didn't try to arrest Kid Smoke that day. He simply turned and walked out of the saloon, leaving the kid seething with frustration. He knew a direct confrontation would be playing into the kid's hands. Instead, he began to unravel the legend piece by piece. He started with Deuce Riley, the old gambler who had found Cassian as a baby. Deuce was reluctant to talk, but Jebediah's persistence and a well-placed bottle of whiskey loosened his tongue. He learned about Cassian's early years, his loneliness, his desperate need for approval. He visited the old training grounds outside of town, where Cassian had learned to shoot and fight. He spoke to the few remaining bounty hunters and outlaws who remembered the boy. He heard stories of Cassian's natural talent, his uncanny speed, but also his inner turmoil, his struggle to reconcile his violent upbringing with his own sense of right and wrong. Jebediah made sure his presence was known. He wanted Kid Smoke to see him, to know that he was digging into his past, exposing his secrets. He planted seeds of doubt in the minds of the townsfolk, reminding them that Kid Smoke was not invincible, that he was just a man shaped by circumstance. He was chipping away at the kid's armor, eroding his confidence, turning his legend against him. Each conversation, each revelation, was another blow to the foundation of fear that Kid Smoke had built. The past was coming back to haunt him, and Jebediah Stone was the ghost leading the way. Kid Smoke started making mistakes. Small ones at first, a missed shot during a card game, a hesitation before drawing his gun. But they were noticeable, especially to those who knew him best. He was distracted, his focus fractured. Jebediah's whispers were getting under his skin. He started drinking more, seeking solace in the bottom of a bottle. He became more irritable, lashing out at those around him. The fear he once inspired began to morph into resentment. The townsfolk, emboldened by Jebediah's presence and the subtle cracks in the kid's facade, started to stand up to him. One evening, a young woman refused to serve him at the saloon. He would have shot her without a second thought weeks ago. But now he hesitated. He saw the defiance in her eyes, the lack of fear. He saw Jebediah watching him from across the room, a silent judgment in his gaze. He backed down, muttering curses under his breath. He tried to recapture his old swagger to reassert his dominance, but it was no longer the same. The fear wasn't there anymore, not like it used to be. He was losing control, and he didn't know how to stop it. Jebediah's tactics were working. He was forcing Kid Smoke to confront his past, to question his identity, to face the consequences of his actions. The legend was crumbling, and the man beneath was starting to emerge. A man who was scared, confused, and desperately alone. The challenge came at sundown. A note delivered by a nervous stable boy summoning Jebediah to the edge of town. High noon, it read, though the sun was sinking fast. Kid Smoke was done playing games. Jebediah arrived to find the kid waiting, silhouetted against the fiery sky. The entire town seemed to be holding its breath, watching from windows and rooftops. This was it, the moment of truth, the culmination of weeks of tension, the final act in the drama of Kid Smoke. The kid looked different. Gone was the cocky swagger, the arrogant smirk. He was pale and drawn, his eyes haunted. He looked like a cornered animal, desperate and dangerous. You wanted this, old man, he said, his voice hoarse. You wanted to see the real me. Well, here I am. Jebediah nodded slowly. I wanted you to see yourself, Cassian, he replied, his voice calm and steady. I wanted you to understand that you don't have to live like this. The kid laughed, a hollow, broken sound. It's too late for that, he said. I'm already too far gone. He drew his gun, the metal glinting in the fading light. Jebediah mirrored his action, his movements slow but precise. The air crackled with tension, the silence broken only by the whisper of the wind. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long, ominous shadows across the dusty ground. The showdown had begun, but this wasn't just a battle of guns. It was a battle for Cassian's soul. The draw was lightning fast. 2 shots rang out, echoing through the town. Dust kicked up around Jebediah's feet. He stood firm, untouched. Kid Smoke swayed, his gun still smoking in his hand. He had aimed true, his shot narrowly missing Jebediah's heart, but something was different. He hadn't followed through. Jebediah's bullet had grazed Kid Smoke's arm, a minor wound, but enough. The kid had a clear shot, an easy kill. But he hadn't taken it. He stared at Jebediah, his eyes wide with confusion. He saw something in the marshal's eyes, not fear, not hatred, but pity, and something else, hope. He saw a reflection of the man he could have been, the life he could have lived. He saw the possibility of redemption, a chance to escape the darkness that had consumed him. The weight of his past crashed down on him, the faces of the men he had killed, the lives he had ruined. He couldn't do it anymore. He couldn't take another life. Slowly, deliberately, he lowered his gun. The legend of Kid Smoke died with that gesture. He had made his choice. He had chosen life over death, hope over despair. He had chosen to face his demons instead of succumbing to them. The silence that followed was deafening. The town waited, unsure of what would happen next. The fable was turning on its head. He didn't say a word. He simply holstered his gun, turned, and walked away. He didn't look back. He didn't offer an explanation. He just walked. He walked past the saloon, past the dusty streets of redemption, past the graves of the men he had killed. He walked away from his old life, from the legend of Kid Smoke. He left behind the fear, the violence, the despair. He didn't know where he was going or what he would do, but he knew he couldn't stay. He needed to find a new path, a new purpose. He needed to become someone else, someone worthy of the hope he had seen in Jebediah Stone's eyes. The legend of Kid Smoke didn't disappear entirely, it transformed. It became a story whispered around campfires, a cautionary tale of a boy raised in darkness who found the strength to choose the light. It became a story of redemption, or at least the possibility of it. Some said he wandered the desert, helping those in need. Others claimed he joined a monastery, seeking forgiveness for his sins. Still others believed he died alone and forgotten, his past catching up with him in the end. But whatever the truth, the name Kid Smoke no longer inspired fear. It inspired something else, a sense of wonder, a glimmer of hope, a reminder that even the most hardened heart can be changed. The legend lived on, but its meaning had been transformed, from a symbol of death to a symbol of possibility. Jebediah watched him go, his heart heavy but filled with a quiet satisfaction. He hadn't killed a monster. He had perhaps saved a man. He knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy for Cassian. The past had a way of catching up with you, no matter how far you ran, but he had given him a chance, a glimmer of hope in a world of darkness. And that was all he could do. He turned his horse and rode away from redemption, leaving the town to grapple with the legend of Kid Smoke and its newfound meaning. He rode towards the setting sun, the sky ablaze with color. He was tired, old, and weary, but he had done his duty. He had faced the darkness and emerged victorious, not with a bullet, but with a choice. The story of Jebediah Stone would fade into the mists of time, another tale of a lawman who brought justice to the Wild West. But the story of Kid Smoke, that story would continue to evolve, to inspire, to challenge. What would Cassian do now? Would he find redemption? Would he succumb to his demons? Would he become a hero, a villain, or something in between? The answer remained unwritten, etched only in the sands of time. The West was a land of endless possibilities, a place where legends were born and reborn, and the legend of Kid Smoke, the boy who chose hope, was just beginning. The end.